Teachers of Reddit, what is the worst case of my child can do no wrong have you seen? Running onto a soccer field to scream at the referee about a call and getting banned from athletics for a year. That mother was a treat. This is how my foray into the world of roughing youth soccer ended abruptly. I was a 13-year-old roughing a group of 6-year-olds. Why did that father feel he needed to yell, curse, and verbally abuse me before threatening physical violence? Anyways, I haven't reffed a game since. That was over 2 decades ago. One of my child patients spit on my face once when I asked him what got him into trouble at school. His mother was right beside him and she said nothing until I glared at her for like 5 seconds. After which she pretended to scold the child. We have this kind of meeting every year with his teachers. We know, son's name, can't do multiplication. He was a freshman in high school in pre-algebra. How he passed 3rd, 8th grade is beyond me besides teachers just passing him to get rid of him. These people had money. They had resources. They could have gotten him tutoring years ago to help him. Instead they preferred we just pass him and excuse his acting out because he refused and couldn't do the work because he didn't have the basic foundation. He couldn't do multiplication so he couldn't do division. And it all spiraled from there. They were so calm about it. Like, what's the problem with that? So what? I was floored. My first year of teaching I taught early elementary. But had to teach a single grade 7 options class where I saw the students 2x a week for 40 minutes. I had one student who didn't hand in a project and marked him accordingly. Parent teacher night came and mom shows up. She closes the door. Spends 5 minutes addressing her son's marks and asking about whether he could still hand in the project, to which I replied sure. She then spends 20 minutes telling me her son thinks I hate him and how everyone, and I mean everyone, loves her son. She went on long rambling stories about former teachers, coaches, etc. and how everyone really loves him and I just really need to spend some time with him so I would see how special he was. I finally told her I couldn't possibly hate her child because I barely knew who he was because I spent 98% of my time teaching on the opposite side of the school. Not a smart thing to say. But the rambling stories. That we were 25 minutes into what was supposed to be a 10-minute interview. Her passive-aggressive nature and the fact that she was so high on her son was starting to irritate me. I asked her what type of reasonable solution she wanted and she told me my personality was clearly the problem. She then got up to leave but returned to tell me that though she wasn't a teacher and wouldn't tell me how to do my job and spend 5 minutes telling me all the ways I'm personally failing her child. Anyway, that was an important first year teacher moment. Never again would I let a parent treat me like that. IWS accused of slamming a door into a teenage student's face. It didn't happen. The CCTV showed it didn't happen. The door had a fire safety feature meaning it could not be slammed. The mum still claimed her precious son would never lie, so me. Cameras and physics must be wrong. I also had a student in kindergarten who regularly punched other students, ran around the room, and refused to do work. His mother called for a conference. And the first thing she said was that his behavior was my fault. She had him switched out of my class. Thank God. I worked the school age room in a child care center. My youngest kiddo was 5 and 11-12 was supposed to be the max age in that room. The center director had a 14-year-old who was bored at home. So she would bring her in and have her help, but instead she ran a pack of mean girls who were constantly defying my instructions and picking on the younger kids. She'd go in and out of the room whenever she felt like it, and when I brought it up to the director as a problem she said, "Are you saying that my child is the problem? I've told her that she should be helping you and she tells me about how helpful she is and that she is constantly doing things for you. How can you complain about her?" No. She's not doing those things at all. Your 14-year-old is manipulating you. Like 14-year-olds do. Not a teacher story. But in the mold. I have 2 sons. 18 months apart. When they were about 8 and 9. Maybe a little older. I took them to the Lego store. where they wanted to spend their allowance. They each had a pot of money to spend. And they carefully looked at all of the sets that they had been eyeballing for some time. But then they got together and decided that if they pooled their money, they could get one big set and each of them could build parts of it and then have it as a joint toy. They sat there and figured out how much they had and they were about $12 short. And I told them not to worry about it. I told them that I was so proud that they wisely were spending the money and working together smartly. And that I would pick up the additional leftover amount. As we were talking, we saw a friend of theirs. He was there with his mother. He walked up and said hello. And in his hands was a Lego Death Star. Which, if I recall, was about $600. And oh god was he bragging about it. His mom came over and we were chatting in front of the boys and she said something like, well, he really wants it and he emptied the dishwasher last night. So he gets a little reward. We said our goodbyes. And made our way to the counter. As soon as they left, my youngest son looked at his brother then looked at me and said, he's a spoiled douchebag. I taught at a school in a mega affluent community. Colossally wealthy families that lived in castles. Very powerful and influential people. Most of the kids were lovely. But there were plenty of sheets. And some were just downright unbelievable. It wasn't the kids' fault. Mind you, they were just spoiled to the point of being devoid of common sense and reality. One particular boy, who we'll call Todd, had basically given up on school. He knew he was set for life and put zero effort into anything. At one point, his grades were so poor that his parents, completely aloof and dependent upon Todd's team of A pairs, Todd called his parents by their first names. Mind you, proposed buying passing grades so that Todd could move on to the next grade. The principal told me that during their meeting, Dad pulled out the checkbook and asked for an amount. Not a teacher but actually a student in high school. There was this kid who would bully people for exactly no reason and even went to the extent to make a kid commit suicide. The kid was really nice and also had lots of friends too. The kid who committed suicide. Just to clarify, he would even bully his family. But when the staff of the school eventually caught on to this, they called his mom and the principal talked to them in his office. I was an office aide, which means I just help deliver papers and stuff, but am mostly stuck in the office where the principal's office is. His door was always open, literally. I saw the principal brought up camera records of the kid bullying people and the mom went on to blame the principal of faking it and lying to her about her son when she clearly saw his face and transferred him to another school, and she tried to sue my principal for fraud. Not a teacher. But definitely fits the my child can do no wrong part. There was a small town I used to live in and the mayor's son was a massive sheet. One night, he got pulled over and arrested for drunk driving by the town cop. The my son is an angel mayor promptly retaliated and within the month fired the cop for some bullshit reason. One student I had, 12M, was really cruel to others. He'd throw slushies, plasticine, pencils, erasers, etc. to students that had invisible disabilities such as autism. His parents would scoff off his bullying as boys being boys. Once his sister, 14F, who was an honors student with a heart of gold, stole his phone and texted people pretending to be him. Their dad was so mad she wasn't allowed to go to her sports competition and he asked the school to continue his lecture from home on good behavior. I'd never seen more unequal expectations for the kids from the same family. The teacher put in charge of lecturing the sister handled it right. She asked the girl if her brother deserved it and then told her the next time she needed to get back at him. The teacher had plenty of ways that would be much harder to catch by the parents. My mom worked in special ed for public schools and one of her students was basically a vegetable. The girl had been deprived of oxygen at birth for long enough that she's not even capable of forming sentences or walking on her own. Her parents insisted she was just misunderstood and actually gifted. This mom fought tooth and nail to get her daughter into the school's gifted program even though her daughter couldn't even count to 10. Quite sad really. Had a parent once refute video evidence of her child striking another child because that's not what her son said happened. Not a teacher. But I was a volunteer for a science camp back in high school. The science camp was broken into different age groups and then each week was a different topic. This particular week I had 4th 6th graders and we were doing a physics is fun course for the week. The class had about 20 kids. All were amazing except for a set of boy-girl twins. They were so mean and hateful to each other. But when separated would uncontrollably sob and cry out for each other. The solution was to put them at the corner of a table. So close enough to each other but also a little more space to eliminate the terrible behavior. This works for 3 days. But on Wednesday we were learning about magnets. We had set a bunch of metal looking objects on the table, things like paper clips, CDs, and coins, and had the kids try to pick up different things with magnet. The little boy decides to grab the CD, break it in half, and run it down his sister's arm. Cause a gash that went down the length of her upper arm and even required stitches. I'm obviously mortified. I get the medic on staff and things are being handled the best they could under the circumstances. When the parents came to pick the kids up, they unleashed all hell onto me and the staff, stating their children were angels and never acted this way at home. The parents were swearing, saying they were going to sue me, and told me their son would never do that and it must have been another student and that I'm lying. That was my last day there. The camp coordinators apologized so much to me I almost felt guilty leaving. But I couldn't deal with those parents ever again. Not a teacher, but here's a retail story relevant to the topic. When I was in high school I worked in an airsoft store. We had a brick and mortar shop and an online store that we shipped internationally from. It was a pretty regular occurrence that kids would steal their parents' credit cards, order something online from us, and have it shipped to them. Most of the time we'd just have them send everything back and we'd refund it. From time to time police got involved. One time, we had a 12-year-old kid who lived about 10 minutes from our store steal his mom's credit card and order about $1,200 worth of stuff from us. Mom found out and came storming into the store with her son and all the airsoft product he had ordered. She's furious, verbally assaulting me at the counter and basically saying it's the store's fault for making our website too easy for her son to order online. She was adamant that none of this is her son's fault and that we should have better fraud detection on our website. Made me so mad I told her maybe she should discipline her kid. She then wanted to speak to my boss, the owner, who told her the exact same thing. Not a teacher, but I work at a school supply store and have asked this question a lot. My favorite one is about a teacher who taught 9th grade and a kid brought a pocket knife into my class and was showing it off. The resource officer, police officer in school, detained the child until his parents came, where they claimed that the teacher planted the knife on him to expel him to make the average GPA at the school higher. I was told the student had failing grades. The worst was when I called a kid's parents because he was harassing several girls and exhibiting violent behavior towards other kids in class. Had a parent-teacher conference about it with all of his teachers and the dean of students present. And in the end his dad said, "I know he's doing this, but you have to understand. It isn't him. It's the devil taking over his body." I taught 6th grade at a private school. Since we're private, we have a specific testing week every spring to assess our students. I sent home an informative sheet describing the rigid schedule we have and when our tests will be administered. Doors have to remain closed and no disruptions were allowed. A little harsh, but it's what we were told to do by administration. If anyone was late, I assured them they can make the test up, but they would have to wait in the office. This kid asked to go to the bathroom. Obviously, as a teacher I can't say no. I told him he had 5 minutes until the test and he will need to be quick. Needless to say, he was not back in time. So he was sent to the office until the testing time was finished. I received a LENGTHY email that began with, "What is your issue with my child? They never read my weekly newsletters and just believe whatever their child told them when they got home instead of asking the adult for their perspective. He's an only child with a single parent. He's everything to her. I get it. But was a real tough year." Not a teacher, but I work on a college campus. had a student that was arrested by campus police for committing a home invasion. The student kicked the door in, pointed a Glock at the occupant's face, point blank, and waited for his buddy to gather the occupant's PS4 controllers and games. They then left. Turns out, the gunman learned that the occupant egged his car a couple days before and this was his vengeance. Gunman's mother freaked out because her 19-year-old child had been arrested and held the belief that if her son's car had never been egged, he wouldn't have had to do that because her son was taught to command respect and was justified because he had been disrespected. Son got 3 years. Lost his football scholarship and a decent chance to better his life. All very sad. I'm a niece, not a teacher. But hopefully that's okay. I once had a mother approach me before I had a chance to speak with her. She was livid that her son had banged up hands. I began to explain that there had been a disagreement with another child when the mother interrupted me to yell, "So you let my son get hurt because some other kid doesn't like him?" She off on how we were allowing her son to be bullied. We didn't care if he was hurt. On and on. Eventually she had to take a breath and I managed to explain that her son had attempted to punch another kid in the face but he had wound up for the punch so dramatically that the other child managed to move out of the way and her son ended up grazing a tree trunk instead. The boy wasn't a bad kid. He was new to the center. His parents had recently split up and his dad wasn't allowed to see them due to some unmanaged mental health concerns. His mom worked long hours in the medical field and his older brother had a very serious, life-threatening condition that required virtually all of her spare time. Both the mother and the boy were under way more stress than I could imagine, but he was not the blameless victim she imagined him to be. Pre-K student brought in a knife from home, chased around another student with it, then punched him in the face, which resulted in a very bloody and bruised nose. This all happened within seconds during recess. When I contacted the parents of the knife child, they said, and I'm not even kidding, "What did you do to make my son bring in a knife to school and punch another kid in the face?" Then they threatened to call the superintendent to get my teaching license revoked for wrongly accusing their child of hurting another student. Yep. Good old parents. Kid consistently came to class stoned. His jacket reeked of weed up. I called the mom already and she told me that her kid promised that he did not use Drew Gus. Fair enough. I'm not the police. If the mom doesn't care then it goes way down on my priority list. He gets suspended a few times for having Drew Gus on him. Mom hires lawyers and appeals every suspension. Because her kid was just holding Drew Gus for friends. Some actually get overturned because the evidence is thin and administration doesn't want to deal with mom and lawyers. But some of them stick. Eventually, he is dumb enough to prompt a search of his locker where they find his impressively large stash. He gets suspended for that as well. Mom calls me to get the homework for the classes he is missing. And as we are chatting she lets me know that her son got framed and, yes, has still never used Drew Gus in his entire life. I didn't argue the point. Some causes are completely lost. Slightly different. But I once taught a child who was occasionally very disruptive. I had to ring the parents to tell them how this child had kicked, punched and then spat on a classmate after a football disagreement. The mum replied with, "I know he hits people and kicks people every now and again. That's just what he does. But my child would never spit at anyone. He's far too nice." Witnessed a mom get kicked out of a hockey arena when I was kid. It was my brother's team playing. I was there as a spectator. She threatened the lives of the referees and even some of the kids, like 12, maybe 13-year-old boys, on my brother's team because she didn't understand the rules of hockey, wasn't ready to see the reality of it. I think her kid was embarrassed as hell and was apologizing to players, refs during this incident, but you could tell this wasn't the first time it had happened. At a social event at someone's house, a toddler was chasing the host's cat and pulling her tail. The cat whopped her one. Cue screaming toddler. The mother, she was a true horror of a woman, scooped her up to comfort her. I figured the cat learned a life lesson not to hurt others or she might get hurt back. Nope. Mom tracked down the cat and held her down while telling the toddler to get the cat back by hitting her. I stared in horror as mom imparted her own life lesson to the child. Remember, if anyone ever hurts you, you hurt them back twice as bad.